You are listening to the Box Office Artists Podcast. I'm James Reyes. I am the Box Office Artist. Welcome to the Box Office Artist Podcast. Now, if you are watching this live, this is streaming live. I am not live, so this is pre-recorded because as you are watching this, I'm probably on the road right now driving to Quebec City, Canada. So if you are in the Quebec City area, I will be at Quebec City Comic Con this coming weekend. But I didn't want to leave you today without a stream and without a podcast. So what I decided to do is take one of my older podcasts, and this is an interview I did a few years ago with a good friend of mine. You might know him if you're a comic book fan. His name is JIM ZUB, or known in comic book circles as JIM ZUB. That's his pro name, JIM ZUB. Prolific Marvel writer. He's worked on everything. One of the probably the go-to guys at Marvel, especially when it comes to writing. But also, I've known him for a long time because for the longest time he was a animation director at Seneca College for their programs there. So he knows. If anyone knows about whether you should go to school for art, it's my buddy JIM ZUB. But in this particular conversation that we had a few years ago, we talked about a whole bunch of things, not just about going to school, but making it in the comic book industry, getting a job with Marvel and DC, getting published by Image Comics. There's a lot in here, and there's a lot for you to learn as well, especially from someone who is as seasoned of a pro as my good buddy JIM ZUB. Before we get in this interview, I did want to plug a couple things for him. Make sure that you check out Conan, SAVAGE SWORD of Conan, that he's writing and drawn by my good friend, Mr. Mike Ruth. It is phenomenal. Get to your comic shops right now. Go look for SAVAGE SWORD of Conan. It is amazing. Also, if you're watching this pretty much when this is going up, and if you are in the New York area, go check him out, New York City Comic Con. But he's at every con this year. He's actually taking a year off of school, from what I understand, and actually traveling the world to all these conventions, which he couldn't do before. But he was very selective. Now he's traveling the world and he's having the time of his life. So to my good buddy JIM ZUB, hopefully he doesn't mind that I'm reposting this particular interview, but this is a phenomenal interview. So I will ask you right now, okay, while you watch this interview, what important points will you take from this interview? Okay, let me know in the comments down below. Okay, let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this interview, what you've taken from it, how you can take some of these points and have it improve your professional art career or help your future trajectory as an artist as well. So without further ado, okay, let's flash back a few years to old me, tee up this interview with Mr. JIM ZUB. Really need school? Really? Can you take on too many art jobs? What if I shoot for a dream and then realize it's not for me? My guest today is the perfect person to ask. His name is JIM ZUB. He first pursued animation, and now he's one of the most recognized comic book writers in the world. He writes Avengers, Rick and Morty, Samurai Jack, Dungeons and Dragons, and he's a college professor all at the same time? What? How does he do it all? Well, we're going to find out in this very special episode of the Box Office Artist Podcast.
Sure. I am here with my good friend here, Mr. JIM ZUB, as he's known. Thank you for coming on the podcast and talking to us today. So for those who don't know, tell us what you do, Jim. What do you do?
Sure. So currently, I'm a professor. I teach up at Seneca College here in Toronto. I'm part of their animation faculty, and I've been there for quite some time teaching courses on drawing, storytelling, and I help mentor our graduates as they work on their portfolios and final films. But what I'm probably far better known for now is writing comics. So I do a lot of writing for just about every major company in North America. So a lot of stuff for Marvel currently. I've done multiple books at Image, IDW. I've done projects for DC Comics, Dark Horse, Dynamite, Vault, you name the company. I was at the Udon studio for many years and have done a bunch of work with them as well. So I have a really kind of strong background in storytelling, writing. I've done artwork and animation kind of all over the place, but currently, like I said, really well known for writing comics, superheroes, and fantasy stuff in particular.
Listen, you had quite the career so far, for
Yeah,
sure. Yeah,
and still going. It's kind of crazy. Yeah,
yeah.
I've been doing the comic thing, depending on how you want to measure it. I made my very first comic, my own kind of personal first comic, literally 20 years ago. So I made a web comic that I started posting online 20 years ago. And that was one of my first kind of forays into making my own stories, beyond when I was a little kid. And, finding out more about the comic industry and kind of online communities and art and all that stuff. So I've it feels surreal to say it out loud. I've been doing this stuff for 20 years in one way, shape, or form, Yeah.
Right on, right on. It doesn't feel that way though, right?
No, thankfully.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Why don't you go ahead and tell us what projects you're working on now?
Sure.
I saw you're working on this really cool mech comic, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah, that looks really cool. With Jamba?
Thanks, man. Yeah. So currently
yeah.
on my plate, I've got a new Dungeons and Dragons miniseries called Mindbreaker that's coming out. And this one acts as sort of a bit of a soft prequel to the Baldur's Gate 3 video game that's currently in early access. Working on Dungeons and Dragons is always an absolute blast. I've also got another comic I'm doing over at Vault called World of Darkness Crimson Thaw, which takes Vampire the Masquerade and Werewolf the Apocalypse, these two kind of seminal supernatural properties, and has them slamming into each other and fighting. It's a ton of fun. And then over at Marvel, I've got a bunch of stuff in development, but currently what you can find that has been announced is called Avengers Tech On.
Yes.
And so what that is essentially a mix of the Avengers with almost like a Sentai show like Power Rangers. So we're working with Bandai. They made these incredible toy designs. And then Jeff Cruz, also known as Chamba, and I have been doing this series, and he is absolutely knocking it out of the park. It's fun, it's colorful, it's crazy. The Avengers lose their superpowers, so everyone gets Iron Man armor to stay in the fight against the Red Skull as he controls essentially the dust that was generated from the shattered Infinity Stones.
Wow.
So it is this big, crazy, over-the-top, dramatic Sentai style story. Jeff's art is amazing. Everyone at Bandai and Marvel have been really fun to work with, and we just came up with the craziest kind of story we could. The designs look cool, the art has been a ton of fun, and people are really responding to it well. I can't wait to get those toys on my shelf. They look so friggin' cool.
Absolutely.
And that is, it's been a real rush. At the same time, I just wrapped up my run on Conan the Barbarian. So I did 19 issues of Conan, or sorry, 13, plus I did some specials and stuff like that. But of the main series, I did 13 issues. It was an absolute blast getting to write this character who meant a lot to me. And those are collected now in 2 trade paperbacks if people want to check them out. Got to do classic sword and sorcery stories with one of the biggest and most important literary fantasy characters ever. And so that's been kind of a real milestone for me in terms of writing.
Right on. That's fantastic. Wonderful work. And also we did, I think it was like 5 years ago, I interviewed you before. We had a great talk about self-publishing, and I'll link that that old interview if you want to hear his thoughts about self-publishing. It opened my eyes a lot to the process. The process is the same, right?
Yeah, it's still the same. I mean, most of that stuff stays the same. There's small little technical things that change, and sometimes companies, move and shift. But the idea of making your own stuff and finding collaborators and then bringing projects to publishers has not changed at all. So
right on. So wonderful information all around. And you teach at Seneca, is that correct?
I do. Yeah, I've been part of their animation faculty for a long time now. I started teaching there part-time back in 2004. And I'm currently teaching courses in perspective drawing, animation history, and I mentor the third-year students on their storytelling and their film projects that they're putting together. Seneca has been an amazing place to develop. Our instructors are top notch. They're really, really good and actively working in the industry, doing the jobs that, our students want to be doing. Our graduates are working. A bunch of our graduates worked on the Spider-Verse movie. We've got graduates working at Pixar. We've got graduates who've been working at Warner Brothers and Blizzard and Ubisoft and Rockstar Games and all kinds of different places for video games, movies, and TV. So it's been amazing. I'm so proud when I see our students out there kicking butt. Comic book artist Jorge Molina, who's going to be doing Batman with Josh Williamson, and he's been doing doing just a host of amazing stuff. He's one of my grads.
All
I
right
taught
on.
that guy perspective drawing.
Right on. There you go.
Yeah, he's obviously far outstripped anything that I can do. He's absolutely phenomenal. And, just as an example. So we've got people who've done comics, movies, animation, all kinds of different stuff.
Right on, right on. On a personal no, do you work with, does Mahmood still teach there? Mahmood,
He does, yeah.
Yeah, he does, yeah.
Totally. Awesome.
He was my last boss when I was
Oh,
used to be
that's
working at film.
hilarious.
Yeah, I used to work at
Nice.
Pixamundo. That was my last film job. Working at
Amazing.
Pixamundo. There
Yeah,
you
very
go.
cool.
How do you pronounce your last name properly, Jim?
Well, it depends. Like, so my like birth name, whatever you want to call it, is Zubkovich. If you were in Ukraine, they would probably say Zubkovich, and they would like emphasize that part of it. But Zub's great. People,
Okay.
it's funny because
It makes it easy, right?
yeah. What's weird is that when I was in college, all my good friends called me Zub. That was like my nickname. And then, people who didn't know me, of course, would call me Jim. And now that my pen name is Jim Zub, and I've been doing this for years and years and years, everyone calls me Zub. Like everyone I work with, everyone everywhere. And so now my close friends call me Jim, and everyone else calls me Zub. Like in the industry, it's like the short form or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, it's just how it went,
No, that works for sure. Like I remember when I was a kid, in grade 2, someone actually asked me, like, my teacher, how do you pronounce your last name?
Right.
So the real pronunciation in the Philippines is Rais, right?
Right.
So I told her that, Rais, and she goes, Rays? I said Rais. She goes, rats? I said Rays is fine.
Good enough. Good enough. Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
As long as yeah, it's fine. I don't worry about any of that stuff anymore. Yeah, exactly. Right. Every so often though, it is kind of cute. You're at a convention or something, and like a little kid will bring a book up and they go, "Are you Mr. Zub?" And you're like, "Yes."
Yes, I am.
That's
yes,
amazing.
I am. So let's go back then. Let's go back to when you were a kid. And for those of you who haven't seen it, and we were just talking about it, Jim has this amazing TED Talk about when he was a kid. So I'll have that all linked up. You guys should definitely watch that after you watch this pod, of course. But why don't you tell me about your childhood? Have you always been like a creative kid growing up?
Yes, I was a massive nerd right from the start. So like, animation, cartoons, and video games, comic books, and a lot of tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons was very formative to my kind of youth. And I actually talk about that. It's kind of core to a bunch of that stuff that I cover in the TED Talk. But playing video games and hanging out with my friends and reading tons and tons of comic books. My brother and I really, a lot of my kind of nerdity was formed by my older brother. He was 4 years older than me, and he was into sci-fi and fantasy. He was into comic books. And so as we kind of, got into this stuff, we just kind of fell down the rabbit hole of excitement for all those things. And we were really obsessed with the Marvel Universe when we were younger. We played tons of Dungeons and Dragons. I read all kinds of Conan books. And so much of that has formed kind of a foundation that now makes up my professional career. And I think, like 7, 8, 10-year-old me would be somewhat in awe and freaked out by all the things I've been able to work on that tie directly back to the stuff that I was into as a kid. So yeah.
Right on. That's amazing for sure. Yeah. How did when you were a kid, did you expect that you were going to go like in this sort of path of a career?
I mean, I went through phases, I think, of wondering how I was going to, what kind of job or career I would have, just like anybody. It wasn't until I was in high school and I started to think about how this stuff worked. And comic books wasn't originally in the cards for me, not because I didn't love them, because I did, but I just couldn't see my way to making a career and a job out of it. As far as I could tell, you got to remember, we're talking about the mid to late 80s into the early 90s. The comic book industry seemed like it was formed around, you had to be in New York City, particularly if you wanted to work for Marvel or DC. Or you had to be like brilliant and British or something, like if you were going to be Neil Gaiman or Alan Moore or whatever. So you had to be British, or you had to, like, to a kid, that's the way it seemed anyways. I didn't understand kind of the full freelancer sort of mentality on it. And getting published just seemed like this weird, mysterious thing. Like authors had their names on the front of books and somehow they made that happen or whatever. And so to me, that didn't seem like a realistic goal. But I loved animation as well. And I saw there was this CBC documentary that was all about Sheridan College and their animation program, and how a bunch of their graduates had gone on to work at Disney and Industrial Light and Magic and stuff like that. And so I thought, oh, that seems achievable. Like I can work in animation, and there's hundreds of names that scroll by on those credits. I could be one of those.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
like a safe and reasonable creative goal for me to have. And so my original goal was to get into animation, and that was what I went for in school. And the training that I had was like classical kind of 2D style animation. And so I worked in TV animation for several years, jumped around to a bunch of different places, worked with a couple independent studios, and worked with a couple what are called kind of spill studios. So the major studio, let's say a television animation studio like Nelvana, they don't just do everything in-house, they will subcontract to other companies. And so I would be working for a studio that was doing whether storyboards or design or animation or backgrounds for production, and we would be just cranking this stuff out. And so it was a really, fascinating time and an experience. And I was still a big fanboy, loving comic books and games and all that kind of stuff. But again, felt kind of removed from it until I started making my own stuff. And that was sort of where that kind of transition started to happen, was realizing that I wanted to grab hold of that more and start making my own things instead of just, kind of executing on other people's projects or other people's things. Yeah.
Right. Which school did you go to, by the way?
I did end up going to Sheridan, and now I teach.
Yes.
Yeah, and now I teach at Seneca.
What year did you graduate? Did you get into Sheridan? Do you remember what year that was?
Oh, here we go. I'm gonna be. So my first year at Sheridan was probably 96.
Yes, that was the year I couldn't get it.
Okay. and then I by 99 I was out, right? So I went off to go work on my first job, because on the year 2000, as that 2000 New Year's was happening, a few days before New Year's I traveled to Alberta to take on a job. So,
right. Yes. No, because you had way more persistence than I did. I took the art fundies too. I took the art fundies
right? Oh,
at
nice.
Sheridan, but like a whole bunch of us, like I think only like 3 of us got in.
Right.
To the actual computer animation, or not, right? Sorry, traditional animation.
Right.
Anyway, but so the rest of us got into illustration. So I took.
Oh, nice.
I took the illustration course.
Cool.
And then I worked for Dreamwave right after that. That's how.
Oh, nice. See, there's some connective tissue there, right?
Yeah,
it's
for sure.
It's kind of fascinating to see, and even now I'm so glad I had those experiences, and I'm so glad I've got that variety of creative experiences to bring to what I do now.
Right.
I know a lot of people, they have a goal or a dream, and it's like, I want to work for this company, or I want to work on this property. And it's like, it's rare that you're just going to shoot right out of school or whatever and do that right from the get-go. Like you're going to build up to it. And even then, like if you would have asked me, of course, I never would have imagined this is where my career would end up, that I would primarily be known for writing, that I would have worked on, Dungeons and Dragons and the Avengers and Conan the Barbarian and Rick and Morty and Samurai Jack and like all these incredible titles that I know and love, you know what I mean? Like that still blows my mind, but it makes sense as things evolve. And I needed to have those initial dreams in order to motivate myself to keep going and push and do things. So even though I'm not doing, like in my original vision for my career, I thought I'd be like a Disney animator living in California or Florida, working on 2D animated films that were no longer in production by the time I graduated. Like I just got a very different vision of what my future could look like. And now I'm doing completely different things. I never imagined I would be a teacher. I never imagined I would be a writer. I never imagined I would have my name on the cover of a book, let alone like 60 books, all that stuff. And yet having that original dream still mattered, and it still motivated me. And the dream evolves and changes and grows. And as you have new experiences and open yourself up to new opportunities, you see new pathways that would never have existed if you didn't have the original dream. Like, it's not just about being a kid and saying, I want to be an astronaut, and then you go be an astronaut. Like, if that pushed you towards science, and then you find some other amazing career in science, that's a wonderful thing, or astronomy or travel, or who knows, like all the different things. Like the goal of being the astronaut kid is not the end goal necessarily of I'm going to put my feet on the moon, although that could end up happening. It's more about I'm motivated towards these broader goals. You know what I mean?
Right. Absolutely.
And that's kind of the way it's been for me in a lot of ways. And like I said before, all those things that I grew up on, games and comics and animation, still inform a lot of what I do, and constantly in unexpected ways. Like I've written more comics for Dungeons and Dragons than any other writer.
Right.
And Wizards of the Coast, the guys that own Dungeons and Dragons, contact me, and I do consulting for them based on my expertise as like my knowledge of old Dungeons and Dragons, because I grew up playing D&D in the early 80s, not the original D&D, but basically the one that really swept up and became very popular. And so, for example, I co-wrote the Stranger Things and Dungeons and Dragons crossover miniseries. And the reason why I was brought in is because I literally grew up playing D&D at the same time as the kids from Hawkins, Indiana in the show.
Right.
So I know exactly what version of the game they're playing. I know the books that came out. I know I've got 100 little anecdotes about what we liked and didn't like, and what was fun and what was stupid, about those things, and can bring that to bear creatively when we're telling these stories.
Right. Right.
And so, but if you would have told, 8-year-old me, keep playing D&D, kid, they're going to pay you a bunch of money for this, you're like, that's insane. Like, it doesn't make any sense,
for sure.
Right. So
no, absolutely. And which brings to the common joke for every artist, all our parents think we're unemployed.
Right.
For the most part. Did your parents understand what you were trying to do when you were going
That's a good question. So they were nervous, very nervous about it. The classic, oh, you're going to be starving artist kind of stuff. But they were never insulting about it. They were just worried. They knew that I was passionate about it. They knew that this was something I really wanted to do. They just wanted to make sure I didn't screw up and have no options. You know what I mean? And so that third time applying for animation, I kind of had to deal with my dad, where he's like, this is your last chance, like third strike. Like, if this doesn't work out, go do film, because you were in film and you were doing well in that program. Mm-hmm. You did 1 year and then you jumped out. Like, go back to that, because at least then, you're doing something that we've already proven you can do. Not because they didn't want me to draw or because they didn't think I could do it, but just, the reality of this stuff.
Right. Yeah.
And so they've always been incredibly supportive. I've got one of the biggest kind of transformations of my life was going to my first San Diego Comic-Con. So I was doing the webcomic 2001. Scott McCloud, the guy who wrote the Understanding Comics and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
He reached out and contacted me about my webcomic, said he really liked it.
Wow.
And we started to correspond back and forth. And he was like, I think webcomics and digital media is going to become a thing, which is so funny now. And he's like, you should come down to San Diego, because we're going to be having all sorts of good discussions and panels and stuff. And I said, Scott, like, I'm not making money on my webcomic. Like, I can't afford a flight. I don't have a badge. I don't know anyone or have anywhere to stay. And he was like, well, I know a bunch of people, so let me introduce you to some of them. And a couple of them lived in San Diego and offered crash space.
Wow.
At the time, it was different. San Diego Comic-Con was still a big convention, but proportionately much smaller than it is now, of course.
Yes.
He could get me a pro badge just by asking the organizers.
Wow.
By just saying, Jim's a professional. And they were like, okay.
Okay.
And so they accredited me as a pro, and whatever. And then the third part of it, the flight, like I still couldn't afford. I was freelancing. I had student debt and all that kind of stuff. Right. And I'm talking to my older brother, and I said, this is crazy. Scott McCloud's talking to me and all this stuff. And he was like, you've got to go. Like, you've got to go to San Diego. I said, what am I like? It'll be fun, but I can't afford it. It's crazy. So he contacted my dad, and he said, if Jim misses out on this opportunity, he's going to regret it forever.
Right.
And my dad bought the plane ticket.
Oh, that's nice.
My dad doesn't know anything about comic books. He doesn't know anything about any nerdy stuff whatsoever. He doesn't play video games. He doesn't do any of those things, but he knew this meant something to me, Wow. And so he bought that ticket, and the friendships and the contacts that I made on that trip, and the momentum that I got off of, these are no longer people I'm just seeing on the screen, but I'm meeting them in person, or we're hanging out, or look at all this amazing art. Right. It really ignited a fire, there for me to want to do more of this stuff. And now, like, since 2002, I've probably been to like 250 conventions, like literally all over the world, like it's absolutely surreal when I think about it. And that kind of started on those early opportunities and the, kind of trying and putting myself out there and all that kind of stuff. And again, like I said before, being good to people and treating other people the way you would want to be treated kind of stuff. And, to think about the fact that I've been able to go to Tokyo or Paris or I went to South Africa. I've been to China. I've been to like all these different countries and places and cities and experiences thanks to comics, thanks to this nerdy stuff.
Yes.
It's wild. It's amazing to me,
Right.
and I hope that, although I'm not traveling right now for obvious reasons, I hope that all comes back, and I hope it never ends. Like, I hope that ability to be able to do this stuff and to put myself out there just keeps kind of rolling.
Right.
And to get back to your original question, because I got it pretty rambly.
No, that's okay.
My parents were really nervous about it. They were really, they just wanted me to be happy and healthy and hale and all that kind of stuff. They really wanted to travel to Africa. They'd never been. So when I got invited to a convention in South Africa, I brought them with me. And that was the first time they ever went to a convention. And that was the first time they've seen the photos and they've seen the books, but that was the first time I think it kind of really became real for them,
right?
Because they saw it, firsthand. And my parents were sort of in awe of the whole kind of thing.
Yes.
And it went from being like, oh, Jim, Jim's doing stuff and he's doing well. And look, he made kind of a book. Look, there's superheroes on it. To like, oh, Jim is making this stuff and people really like him. And, they want his autograph and all that kind of stuff. That really turned a corner for them kind of mentally.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So which is fun, but they'd always been supportive of it. I think vaguely confused. Like when I would tell them, yeah. I'm going to California, the year after they bought me a ticket, I'm going this time and someone else is paying for it. And they're just like, really? Really? Like, and then I would travel to, 10 different cities in the US and they were just like, how are you paying for this? And it's like, I'm not, like, I'm going with the studio or I'm going to work or I'm going to do this. And they were just like, okay, like if that, I guess that's how that goes, because in their mind, travel is something you pay for because it's a vacation, what I mean? So
yeah, exactly. No, I think that's wonderful. Like, even though your parents didn't understand, they were very, very, very supportive at the same time, which I think is fantastic for sure.
Yeah, and now it's so weird because, like, the Marvel movies and everything are just worldwide. Like, my parents watch all those films and stuff. They still don't read comics or anything, but occasionally, mom will talk about the stuff and she kind of confuses a bunch of it. Or when I was working on Avengers, Avengers Endgame was coming out.
Right.
And so, of course, she was really proudly telling all of her friends I work on Avengers, and they assume the movies.
Right,
and
of course.
Like, no, it's doing the comic books or whatever. And they're like, oh, does Jim know, Chris Evans and all these people? And it's like, no, I don't know those people. Like, I don't know those actors. That's not how this works. Or like she would tell me, she goes, oh, my neighbor's friend, they really like superheroes. I said, oh, cool. She said, yeah, their favorite is Spider-Man. I was like, oh, that's great. I told them you do that. I'm like, I don't do Spider-Man. Like, what are you talking about? She goes, oh, close enough, close enough. Yeah. There's no difference between, the Avengers and Captain America or Spider-Man or anything. It's all just,
it's all the same.
I'm amazed, the Marvel DC divide. Should probably tell them I do Batman or something, right?
Right, for sure. Yeah. Speaking of which, have you seen any of your work being adapted into the movies? Have you seen any, like, from pieces of storyline or anything like that?
Yeah, I haven't had, at the end of all the Marvel stuff, they've got the special thanks credits. So I don't have any of those popping up just yet. But it's been, because my Marvel work really kicked off in like 2016. So relatively recently.
For sure.
And most of the storyline stuff they've been adapting is stuff good 10 years previous to that in most cases. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So nothing direct,
nothing direct.
But it's been really cool to be able to build on some of the stuff that we've got. Like when I was writing Champions, which is this team of young teenage heroes at Marvel, we created some new superheroes, and one of them was an Indigenous character here in Canada, and her code name is Snowguard, and she's from Nunavut and all this kind of stuff. And a lot of people, have talked about the fact that it's like, well, we need to have Indigenous representation on the screen as well. Right. And every time one of those lists comes up, like that character is wedged right in there. Like this character would be great. And obviously I'd be thrilled, that would be an amazing kind of thing to have. Or some of the plot lines that we ended up doing with characters like the Scarlet Witch or Vision, or stuff that I've done with the Grandmaster. We did a really cool storyline called Avengers No Surrender. And you know, the Grandmaster is a very different character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe,
Right.
but you could still see some ways that you could take kind of the DNA of this stuff and hopefully see it, you know, brought across.
Right.
But like the characters have shown up now in all kinds of different little media and video games and kind of bits and pieces in the mobile games and on the merch. And it's fascinating to be even a tiny part of that sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
One of the first gigs I did at Marvel was actually a Disney project. So they were taking all these, the different Disney rides and adapting them into graphic novels. So I did Journey into Imagination, this miniseries called Figment, which is about that purple dragon character from Epcot.
Oh, right.
And when that book came out, it did way better than I think everyone was expecting, because they didn't realize the Disney kind of park fandom is very intense, like super into this stuff. And so they started selling that book at the gift shop in Epcot and whatever. And I would go, and they're just like, it still sells like crazy over there, which is amazing to me, you know, to go to the Disney park and like see your book on this in the stores there or whatever. Or to do a signing. I did D23 is this like Disney Fan Expo convention.
Yes.
The year that book came out, and we did a signing. And the Disney fandom is amazing. They're so passionate and so into it. And we were supposed to sign for an hour, and they had to extend it. Just to keep it, because we just kept
too many people
signing. Yeah, and it was just like, okay, wow, this is awesome. Like, you know, and you realize that these characters and this stuff that you do, you know, it has an effect on people. Like they're really it's part and parcel of kind of who they are and their passions and all that sort of stuff. And that's one of those things about fandom that I think a lot of times people talk about the negativity of it, and they're like, oh, these fanboys getting all angry, you know, or raging or arguing. And it's like, yes, absolutely, there's inappropriateness at times and what may have you, but the reason why these people are so passionate about this stuff, and the reason why these heated arguments about what should a character do and what should a character be, is because they're passionate about it. Is because these characters and these shared worlds have had an effect on their lives, and in some cases on how they see themselves, you know. And that is a really amazing and potent thing to realize that you get to contribute to. And kind of scary and exciting. Like it's everything, you know.
For sure. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about animation then.
The Toronto area has a surprising amount of great animation, you know, education. There's a lot of good schools. Canada as a whole, like you've got the Vancouver Film School as well and stuff like that. Like there's quite an animation tradition here in Canada. I didn't even realize until I dipped my, you know, kind of toe into it and wanted to do this thing. And so it was great. It was a really good training ground. I mean, it also was intimidating as all hell. Like the amount of competition to get into the school. Like I didn't get in on my first try. And that's something I tell my students now, or people that are applying to these schools. So I applied to Sheridan and I didn't get in. So I went to Humber College for a year for film and multimedia.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah.
And while I was there, I learned a little bit about cinematography and photography and a little bit of graphic design and some digital. Like it sounds weird, but at the time, like Photoshop was just becoming a thing. And so it was like, oh, here are these softwares and here's things you can do with them. Okay, cool. This is really neat. And then I applied again, but that year that I was doing film and photography and stuff, I wasn't working hardcore on my art, and I should have been, obviously, but I just wasn't, you know, it was a new experience. It was first year college and all the stuff that entails, right? And so I applied again, didn't get in the second time, and I was like, I'm an idiot. Why do I keep applying if I'm not going to, you know, apply myself? Like I'm not going to put myself into this and really work at it. So I took a year of art fundamentals and art intensive and built up those core skills that, you know, most high school art courses aren't going to teach you. They're not going to teach you figure drawing. They're not going to teach you much beyond the rudimentary basics of perspective, if anything. And so I really kind of dug in on that for another year. And then on my third go, that was when I got into the, you know, the course that I wanted and really started to bust away at this stuff and realized very quickly that whatever skill level I thought I was at, going into school was not like everyone there in the program was the best artist in their high school or the best
Right, for
artist
sure.
that.
Yeah.
And so your ego gets very quickly a real lesson in hard knocks. And as good as you thought you were, the second year and the third year students were that much better. And even they were still, working their butts off to try and figure out what professional quality felt like and looked like and would be like. And so that was a really tough but kind of good part of my education, was just that idea of you've got to really bust away at this stuff every single day. You've got to keep building these skills, and this stuff is going to be a lifelong pursuit. Like, you don't just do it, learn something and go, well, I've mastered it, on to the next thing. You're constantly testing yourself and building and trying to refine those skills. And particularly when you're talking about storytelling and character design and animation in particular, because even if you could draw still images okay, can you make this stuff move well? And even after you can make it move smoothly, can you then imbue it with a performance? Like, it's a real incredible art form, particularly your classic 2D animation, where you're bringing these lines to life and imbuing it with these characters and this performance. And so I loved it, and I still love it, but it is an insane amount of work and an intense kind of a skill set. And as I was graduating, the industry was changing rapidly. Computers were becoming more and more fundamental to the process, and 3D animation was starting to overtake all the traditional kind of pipelines. And so as I graduated, I felt like a dinosaur. I was like, I have these amazing skills and they're already, it's not that they're not applicable. It's just that the technology is already starting to outstrip certain aspects of it. Right. And so I toyed around a little bit with some 3D animation stuff, but I didn't enjoy it. It didn't have the same kind of visceral feel to me, and it wasn't quite what I wanted. Like, I think that stuff's amazing and I'm in awe of the technology, but that wasn't what I got into this for, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so I did some 2D animation stuff for a while, and then my original plan was to go back to school, get some 3D animation training. And instead I lucked out with another opportunity. So, so much of the stuff that's happened, people talk about networking and they say, you should network. And they always say, and it's like, what does that mean? It just means like, treat people well. And when you meet people, get to know them, if they're in your industry, or even if they're not, because you never know where these things will just cross paths. Just be curious, be sociable, be kind, and try and treat other people the way you would want to be treated. Right. And so a person that I went to school with, this guy, Omar Dogan.
Oh yes, yes.
Omar and I went to school together.
Oh really? I didn't know that. Yeah. Really?
Yeah. That's where we first met. And when I was in residence, we're going to roll back and forward a little bit because it all kind of interrelates. My brother, because he was older than me, he went to the University of Waterloo and he got heavily involved in their science fiction club. And for a short time, that science fiction club essentially just became an anime club because there were all these Japanese students that came to take Waterloo's programming and engineering courses. They brought their comics and their cartoons with them and kind of blew everyone away, right? And so my brother got super hooked on anime and brought a bunch of this stuff home when he came to visit, and that knocked me out. So I got obsessed with anime and manga. And this is not a period of time where you can just find this stuff. Like, Blockbuster Video is just starting to carry a couple tapes that you can rent. Right. Most of the stuff we were watching was fan subtitled or not subtitled at all. And we literally just had summaries of what was happening in the episode, and we would just read it and go, okay, these two hate each other. Oh, cool. Like, it was crazy. And so I started to get really invested in that. I built up, thanks to him and the Waterloo Club, I built up a huge collection of anime that I had on VHS. I brought that to residence with me when I went to school. And Omar was one of the people who was borrowing tapes from me. I had a lending library of anime that I was doing at the college. Because not a lot of people had access to that stuff. So, many years before any of the Studio Ghibli films would officially come to North America, I had already seen Nausicaa. I had already watched Kiki's Delivery Service and My Neighbor Totoro and A Castle in the Sky and all that stuff, and loved it, absolutely obsessed with it, right?
Mhm.
And so when Omar, we ended up working at a studio together out in Calgary, Alberta for just over a year. And then when he came back to Toronto, he ended up hooking up with that comic book publisher Dreamwave. And then a group of those people went off and formed Udon. And so when I came back to Toronto, Omar called me up and said, hey, you got to come by and see what we're doing here at the studio. I got to meet a bunch of the gang there. And then he recommended me for a gig. I started off literally doing like coloring some comics.
Right.
And then over the course of that summer, what I was originally going to do was I was going to color comics and kind of not spend money and then go back to school in the fall for 3D animation. And over that summer, built up a really good relationship with the crew at Udon, particularly Eric Coe, who runs the place over there. And by the end of the summer, he's like, it would be really helpful if you stuck around. Do you really need to go back to school? And I was like, I really don't want to. Like, I'm doing this 3D thing is like,
Right.
that is the way I'm going to make money. And it's like, well, or you could do this and make money. And so I stayed at the Udon studio, freelanced. I did some freelance illustration, and then I would slowly work my way into more of an art director and a project manager position. And it's starting to organize stuff or go to conventions and help run the booths, or go to other conventions and network for the studio and get more work. And found that really enjoyable and fun and engaging. And Eric, I learned so much from Eric and from the rest of the gang. I learned a lot about publishing. I learned a lot about networking. I learned a ton about comic books and the industry and storytelling and art and pre-press. It was just like this kind of wild sprint of an education in everything entertainment. I got to travel a bunch. We got to build up really great friendships with the people that we met and the people that were working at the studio. We hired and we expanded. You were one of the artists that I was working with at the time, and it was a ton of fun.
Yeah,
we were doing all kinds of cool projects, and that changed the course of my life because it kind of reconnected me to comic books and the whole comic book convention culture.
Mhm.
And I realized that one of the things I was really missing was making stories. That when I was working in animation, I had started and I did this little web comic for fun, and I kind of dipped my toe into making comics and met some people through web comics, and I was like, oh, this would be amazing, but I don't know how to turn this into paying work and a career. And so it kind of was there for a little bit and then faded off. And then through Udon, I was like, no, there's a way I can kind of grab hold of it with both hands, start to make my own stuff. And so as things went along, I got more and more involved in the story end of things. I got more involved in the creative kind of end of things. And that's where my passion has kind of always been. And the same thing with animation. I love art, I love design, I love drawing. But if I have to choose, the story is more important to me. That's the thing that I really love most, is trying to get my hands on, okay, what is the story we're telling? What are these characters all about? Where are they going and what's going to happen? And slowly but surely kind of transitioned over to making my own stuff, doing some writing on different projects at Udon, and then slowly but surely making my own stories and getting those out.
You are the perfect guy to ask this. So
Sure.
I'm going to ask you in both the context of someone who wants to get into animation and someone who wants to get into some sort of into the comic book industry.
Right.
How important is school when it comes to both of them? Is it necessary at all?
As an educator, I know everyone's going to assume that I'm going to say, you got to go to school. And it's like, I do think there are a lot of people benefit from it. I think the vast majority of creative people benefit from the structure and they benefit from the feedback, because as much as there are, and there really are more resources available to us now online than ever before, most people will not put themselves through it in a methodical fashion.
Right.
And they will not receive the kind of feedback that they need on a regular basis to build those skills. And if having a deadline that is imposed from the outside is important, and it is for most of us, and if getting critique from people who know the material is important, and it is for most of us, then I think school has a really important role to play in people's growth. That being said, I have seen and experienced all kinds of people who are self-taught, who have been motivated, who have been able to kind of bridge that divide through their own, efforts outside of the school system. And I fully support that. And I think it's phenomenal. And I think it speaks to the strength of their character and their tenacity that they were able to do that. You know what I mean? And so the resources are out there, drawing resources and storytelling resources and software and all that kind of stuff, if you seek it out. The difficulty is, are you coming at it in a good way? Are you organized, and are you able to really see your own development and have the kind of tools to critique it? That's the difficult part, right? The other benefit of school is something that is so valuable to your growth as a career, which is community, right? So much of these things, unless you're an independent auteur and you're just making your own stuff and then trying to get it out there, you're going to end up working with other people, right? And in many ways, the community of people that you find at each stage of your development is going to be important to your future career, right? I would not be in comics if it wasn't for Omar and Eric and Udon, because the trajectory of my life tilted in a very different direction once I, met them and went into the studio with them. And so wherever you are in your development, you're going to be around other people, and they're going to help you and motivate you and inspire you in all these different ways. And a school provides that right from the get-go. And it provides it with a group of people who are at the same relative developmental level that you are. So they're all eager to learn, and they're all getting their start, and they're all struggling through the challenges together and supporting each other, in terms of actual advice or in terms of emotional, support or whatever it might be. And if you don't have that, generally it's going to be harder. You know what I mean? You have to find it, or you have to build it, whether that's an online community, whether it's an art forum, whether it's a Discord server, whether it's a whatever. You're either building it or you're attaching yourself to someone else's and finding those support systems and encouragement in your career. And a lot of times school is the natural version of that. But again, it doesn't necessarily have to be. Like, I have my school contacts, and Omar ended up being one of those. And then there's the Udon crew, the family of people, that we all work together on these projects. And then there's, every single project kind of begets its own little family if you all get along, right?
Yeah.
So almost every comic project I've done, our creative team, we have a lot of pride in the work, and we look out for each other. And if you heard that someone was looking for work and you liked working with them, you might bring their name up again in a meeting, or you might encourage someone to hire them, And those are the kinds of little momentum boosters that can have a huge effect on your career over the long haul, right? And so that, when you put those elements together, obviously the formalized training, the organized fashion that school, is built on, the curriculum, the deliverables that say you must complete these things and you will be evaluated on it. And then you mix in the community aspect and the support systems. I feel like art education can be incredibly valuable, but it is not a requirement. And no one in this field cares what degree or piece of paper you have. They will never ask you for your grades. They will never want to know what your grade point average is. They don't care if you were valedictorian or if you barely scraped by. All they're going to look at is the end result. What is the work? What is your capabilities? How well do you communicate, and how well do you engage?
Absolutely. That is a wonderful answer. And every point you had, that's why I went to school, because I knew I couldn't do any of that by myself. That's why I went to
And there's nothing wrong with
sure.
it. I'm the exact same boat, right?
For sure.
Like, I don't want to make it sound like if you can't be independent and educate yourself right from scratch, like, this is a hard thing to do.
For sure.
And the number of teachers that I had who inspired me and got me thinking in a different way, because I thought I knew something about a subject, and they would show me an example, or they would show me, in some cases, whole areas of art and animation that I had ignored. And they said, look at how cool this is. And at first, just their enthusiasm makes you go, all right, I'm paying attention. And then you see the value in it, and it broadens your own horizons. And you're like, wow, okay, I'm glad I know that. And I never would have experienced it without your engagement. You know what I mean?
For sure.
So I want to be able to do that for my students. One of the courses that I teach is animation history. And I've got a really big archive of old animated films. And most of the time, the students are understandably very inspired by modern stuff.
Right.
And I'm able to show them a clear through line of that filmmaker you really love. They were inspired by this filmmaker who was inspired by this filmmaker. And here's the kind of the core essence of the thing.
Right.
And
Yeah.
they can see it all the way through and they go, whoa, this is kind of incredible. Like, this is such a neat. And sometimes those influences are very clear. That video game Cuphead is built off of like 1930s Fleischer animation and rubber hose kind of
Really?
fun stuff. And so it's got that distinctive look where it's a clear attachment to a very old art style.
Right.
But most of the time it evolves, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And if students say, oh, they love, Studio Ghibli and the Miyazaki films, I can show you where that stuff came from. And I can show you the artists who inspired Miyazaki. And you're just like, what? This is crazy to me. And you're like, but you'll see the DNA of that artist in everything that he does. You know what I mean? So.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So with that in mind, okay, so for both animation and for comic books, what would you, if someone were to want to go invest and go to school, what kind of programs would you suggest that they would take to get into those specific fields?
Obviously, there's tons of different areas where people can get involved in these industries. And the obvious one is art, because those are the courses that I think are the most visible and obvious. But don't discount things like the technical end of things. If you are a more computer or programming oriented person and you don't draw, but you still love animation or you still love video games, and the support systems and networking and programming, and particularly now where computer animation uses so many of these like physics engines and rendering and all this stuff, that involves programming, that involves computer technicians.
Absolutely.
And so special effects, all that stuff, don't be afraid to look into those areas. But if you do want to do art, I think animation is an amazing industry because it teaches you so many technical and creative aspects. You learn about storytelling, you learn about appeal, you learn about design. You learn how to draw faster than you ever imagined.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You learn how to tell stories effectively. And that is a huge part of this thing. Our job as entertainers is to communicate ideas and to engage an audience. And you learn how to do that. One of the most valuable classes that I had in animation was not even drawing. It was the acting course that we took.
All right. Right on. Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's all about character and it's all about confidence and it's all about what you are communicating. It's public speaking, it's all those things. And you take a course like that and you watch footage of yourself acting through a scene or even just doing an interview and talking, and you will realize things about yourself. Like there's a reason why now I don't say very often. Like I haven't counted, obviously, because I'm just talking to you.
Right.
But if some studious person wants to go back and count, I probably have not said a lot of ums and ahs and those kinds of noises that we would typically associate with someone being nervous or whatever. Like I have built up I think that's also just years of teaching. If you have any kind of vocal tick whatsoever and you're teaching in front of a class, you'll find out real fast because the students will tell you.
Right.
They'll make fun of you for it. And that's good. That's fine, But that kind of stuff had a huge, profound effect on me in terms of how I speak and how I present my ideas and all that kind of communication stuff above and beyond the art itself, right? And then you put in the friendships you're going to make and the relationships you're going to have. So many times you'll hear about artists or writer and artist or musicians and actors and all kinds of different people, and the story tracks back to, and they met in university. You know what I mean? Because that's that really fun, exciting part of your life where you're like discovering what you love and what your taste is and who you want to become, and that is something that I think is really cool about these courses. So get into film, get into animation, illustration, dig in and not only enjoy what you're learning, but also the people that you're learning it with.
Right.
And be curious and excited about their growth and excitement and their enthusiasm, because that will pay off in ways that you can't possibly imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful advice for sure. Yeah. So, and speaking of advice, as we're coming up to the time here, and thank you so much for being very generous with your time today. Yes, yes. Very inspiring words you had today for us.
Thanks, man.
But and let's keep that going. So, let's break it down. So for the kid who wants to go into some sort of animation,
Right.
what is the best advice you could give to that kid?
If
who
you
wants
want to
get
be an
animation?
animator, like there is no sooner time like than now to start drawing. If you're not drawing already, even if you want to be involved in a more technical end of the art form, having an art background is really, really valuable. The tools are becoming easier to use. So it's less about software than it is about knowledge and just good drawing and good design. And I know it doesn't seem very sexy, but like the core of drawing is like good figure drawing, drawing from life, perspective, construction, volume, all that kind of stuff. Even if you want to do things in a more cartoony style, even if you're thinking in a more stylized kind of output, having that core of basic drawing knowledge will bolster whatever you want to do. It'll make you better at whatever output you want to have at the end of this thing. And so don't discount the basics. Don't think that you can skip it. Don't think that you're better than it.
Right.
Those things will always be valuable. Understanding proportion, understanding perspective, understanding anatomy, that stuff has value, and it makes drawings look intrinsically stronger when you have that knowledge. And when I see artists that they just look at the outer, like if this was a cake, they're just looking at the frosting,
Mhm.
and they want all the sugary outer decoration, but they literally have no cake underneath. They have no foundation. They have no knowledge of how to bake this thing and how to make it work. And the analogy's falling apart. But the point is, like,
No, I get you.
that you've got to know those core elements. You've got to really be able to see them and consistently produce them, so that the alarm bell goes off in your head when you're straying too far or something's not working properly, and you know how to go back and fix it.
Mhm.
Like a lot of times the students will bring me stuff and I'm drawing over top of it, or I'm giving them feedback, and then once I'm able to point it out, they go, oh my God, how could I not have seen that?
Right.
And they look at a bunch of the drawings, they go, I've been doing this for years. And it's like,
Right.
but now put the mark in the ground. You're not going to do that anymore. Like now you can fix it and you will be better for it, you know?
Mhm.
And I remember even myself, I struggled with things like perspective drawing in school, and now I teach it, which is surreal.
Right.
But I started teaching and I knew the material, but when you have to look at someone else's material and you're constantly critiquing it, you get better at that stuff fast.
Right.
And I remember one of my instructors who was really good at perspective drawing, he would like fix an ellipse. So when you have a circle tilted in perspective,
Yes.
you know, if it looks off, the whole thing, the volume looks wonky.
Mhm.
And he would just quickly sketch over top. And I was like, how can I not see that? And then the first time I did that on a student drawing, where I just like quickly flicked my pencil over top and said, no, it's more like that. And they were like, wow. And in my head, I was going, wow, like, when did I get here? Like I crossed at some point that, you know, that bridge, and now I'm able to do this stuff.
Right.
I never thought I would get there. That's cool. That feels like a really neat moment, you know?
Absolutely.
And so it's not about, I think the other thing that throws people off is, because they see a lot of artists posting artwork on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or anywhere,
Mhm.
and everything looks amazing.
Yeah.
They're not seeing the crappy drawings. They're not seeing the weak stuff. They're not seeing the things that didn't work out.
Yes.
They're only seeing the best version of that artist. And so they assume that every single thing that they draw has to look perfect, has to be posted online, has to be, you know, whatever finished level of artwork. And that's just not true.
Mhm.
Specifically when you're starting out, you know, like fill sketchbooks with studies.
Right.
It's okay to look at photographs and try and reproduce elements of it. It's okay to build off reference material or even draw other people's drawings, as long as you're not claiming them as your own,
Exactly.
as
Yeah.
a learning process. Don't post those up because they're not your work,
Exactly.
but
Yeah.
learn from them and build upon them, you
Mhm.
know? And that is really what those stages of development, I feel like a lot of professional artists, because they're just posting their best stuff online, they give a false impression of skill and perfection that is not real, you
Right.
know? In the
Absolutely.
same way that the Instagram influencers, you think that every day of their life is perfect in every way, and every photo they've ever taken has no blemish on it, and the sun is out, and they
Mhm.
have not a single flaw on their skin, and all that kind of stuff. It's like
Right.
that's been manufactured, you know, for your consumption.
Mhm.
That's fine, but just know that your own artistic development is going to be slower and more difficult because you're going to see all those flaws and you're going to go through all those processes, you know?
Right, right.
One of the things I tell my students is I say, look, everyone else's career looks like a highlight reel and yours is a slow motion car crash because you're living it. And you're just like,
Right.
what is going wrong? Why can't I make this work? And you think that everyone else's, the grass is greener stuff, like everyone else's career is better.
Mhm.
And you're like, no, they go through the same struggles. They have the same difficulties. If they don't now, they definitely did at the start, you know?
Right. Right.
You just
Absolutely.
weren't there for it. You just weren't living their life.
No, that's true. No, very, very true. And I give the same advice, like, because I get a lot of kids who like to copy my
Mhm.
artwork, and then they'll tag
Sure.
me, and then they'll
Right.
tag me, right, which
Right,
is
right.
great. And then I go back to them,
Sure.
this is fantastic. Now, why don't you do the same thing, but change up the pose?
Right,
Try
right.
to do the same pose. And like,
And,
"Oh,
and again,
okay."
it
You know,
also
stuff
depends
like
on
that.
the age of the person. Like
Exactly. Yeah.
someone, if a little
Sure.
kid brings me a drawing that they
Yeah.
made that's like same as my drawing, great, right? Because
Yeah, it's
that's
great. It's fantastic. Yeah.
It's what I did when I was a kid as well. I
Mhm,
remember
yes.
redrawing every fantasy cover badly and redrawing every, you know, comic that I could get my hands on
That's how we
because
get
that
started.
was
Yeah.
right. And that
For sure.
even that ability to analyze and to break it down and to redo it, you learn stuff from it.
Mhm.
Just don't mistake that for creation. You know
Yes,
what I mean?
absolutely,
It's
yeah.
development. Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a big thing as well. And everyone wants to put their best foot forward and be hired and get paid to do this stuff.
Right.
But understand that it is tons of fun. I absolutely love this, but it is also a job, right? And if you look at your own work and you're really, really honest with yourself and you say to yourself, look, getting away from the fact that you know yourself and you know how passionate you are and how deeply you want this as a job. If you were the publisher, the editor, the art director, and you looked at your stuff and you compared it to professional work,
Mhm.
are you really parallel to what's being put out? Are you
Right.
as good as, and not as good as the worst stuff? Like
Right.
every so often someone will say to me, well, I draw better than crappy artists. And you're like, yeah, but no one's going to hire you because you're 5% better than the worst. Do you know what I mean? Like
Exactly.
that person already has a job, whatever you may think of their artwork. That person already has all the contacts and has done the work for years and delivered or whatever may have you, or has a good
Mhm.
reputation or has sold a bunch of, who knows, right? Point is, you're trying to enter into the industry. You have to
Right.
enter in whatever above the halfway point in terms of skill level, because the effort it's going to take to bring you into the fold has to be worth that effort.
Right.
And so if they look and they go, oh, this person kicks the crap out of like half the people we have at the company, well, clearly I want them, you know, and they're just going to get better. Like we could be a part of that development and see their growth and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
That's the sort of stuff you want to, you know, kind of motivate yourself towards. And also realize that it's not going to be about one single moment. There have been in the rearview mirror key moments in my life where, oh, I didn't realize that was a big deal. And then it became a big deal later. But generally speaking, it is about an ongoing marathon run of activities and output that you're constantly going to be drawing or writing or whatever that creative career is. And you'll have little jumps that happen along the way, but you're never going to, like, the world is not American Idol. Like you're not going to get called up on stage and they're going to say, this is your one shot. And if you fail here, you will never be famous or successful or whatever.
Right. Right.
I mean, even American Idol is obviously manufactured and all that kind of stuff, but it's like, that's not how this stuff really works. Like there are people that companies I wanted to work for and I strived to, and I had setbacks and it looked like it wasn't going to happen. And then later on it did. And it was like, oh, Marvel being a perfect example. You know, I had tried to get work with Marvel 2004, 2005, 2006. And, you know, like I started getting regular work for Marvel in 2014. Right.
Right. Yeah.
And you have, you know, periods where you see that growth and you have other periods where you're just sort of like kind of leveled off a bit and waiting for the next sort of boost. And that's okay too. Just keep plugging away at this stuff. These careers are marathons and they require you to stay moving more than taking crazy risk it all kind of runs and throwing yourself off the cliff and going, well, if no one catches me, I guess it's the end. You know what I mean? Like that's not how a career stuff really works.
Right.
So
Right,
Yeah.
for sure. And it's amazing advice you gave, because to me, listening to it, it's not just advice for people getting to animation. Like it
Right,
also
right.
applies to comics, applies to any art field,
Everything.
to be
Yeah,
on
yeah.
everything. And it's very, very valuable for everyone to know, for
Thanks,
sure.
man. 2010 was kind of my breakout, because that was the year that I did a book at Image called Skull Kickers.
Yes.
I worked with this amazing artist, Chris Stevens and Edwin Huang and Misty Coates. They were a great creative team. And we made this fun fantasy series. It's like a comedy, action comedy, sword and sorcery thing. And it was basically the kind of book that I would have loved growing up. And that, I think that's really valuable advice just in general. At the time, there weren't a lot of fantasy books out in North America. I mean, they'd been, from time to time, but fantasy was not a big deal at the time. And I didn't care. I just wanted to make something that I would like and I would enjoy. And I think a lot of times artists or creators, they will kind of look and go, oh, what are the big trends, or what is going to be most popular, or what are people really into? And it's like, generally by the time you're seeing a trend, you're not going to be able to catch it. It's
Right.
very hard to come in on the mid to tail end of one of these trends anyways. And on top of that, the amount of work it takes to make one of these things is so intense. If you're not genuinely interested, like focused, crazy, obsessed with it, you're not going to finish it. Like, it's
Right.
just not going to happen. And if you make something that comes, it sounds corny and say from the heart, but something that you are invested in and something you care about and you're excited about, that will help push you through the hard times, and that will help you to get to the finish line. And so I put out Skull Kickers, and it's not like I put that book out and immediately the phone started ringing, but I started to tilt that reputation from, oh, Jim is a project manager, oh, Jim is an art director, or the guy that runs the booth at the studio, to, oh, Jim is a writer. Jim's got ideas. Jim's really good. This book is fun. All that kind of career narrative started to form in ways that I never anticipated, honestly. And so I started to get offers to do other writing. And the more that I did, the more I enjoyed it, the more I was able to use all the stuff that I had learned, working at the Udon studio, to kind of build and know how to run a project, how to get stuff in on time. I had done editorial work where I was trying to get scripts and art from artists and writers. And now I'm on the other end delivering as a writer. I'm like, well, I know what I would want to see. I know what organized looks like to me as the project manager. So I would deliver that to my editors, and they were like, oh man, you're the most organized writer we work with. Like, this is great. And so having all those other experiences, as much as it meant my writing career kind of started later, it bolstered me a lot, and it built a really strong foundation for me to understand all this stuff. And my art background gave me a really solid understanding of what the artists were doing, or how to give feedback, or how to describe things in a way that we were all going to get what we wanted at the end of it,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That's quite the journey there.
It's wild, right?
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. But
When I try and explain it to people, it's weird.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
when you lived it, it all made sense. Yeah.
No, no, absolutely. And I totally get what you at the end there, where you talk about, you knew how to please the editors because you were one yourself. Like when I did actually go take computer animation. I
nice.
remember before, I think I almost took your course, if I remember correctly.
Hilarious.
Yes, but I did end up going to Sheridan for computer animation. But they made us do like everything, like from the rigging to the animating to the modeling, and then people came in like, well, I just want to be a modeler.
Right.
But by getting that experience now in the pipeline, okay, I understand now what what the texture artists have to do, what everyone does, and how I can help them, because I know what it's like to do it, right? So that experience definitely does help out. Like, what's a regular schedule like then for you when it comes to writing your comics, if you could call it regular?
That being said, I like a couple of years ago, before the pandemic, I would have said I don't have a regular schedule because everything's so chaotic. I would be traveling, like I would do 12 to 15 conventions a year, plus I'd be teaching, plus I'd be writing. Right. So I would be usually teaching at the school 3 to 4 days a week, come home, have dinner with my wife, close the door to my studio and just write as much as I could until I could barely keep my eyes open, crash, wake up, do it all over again, and then get ready to travel, jump on a plane, sometimes right on the plane, sometimes right in the hotel, just whatever I could do to keep up correspondence and make sure I was delivering on my deadlines. Things are easier now in the sense that I'm not traveling, so I have a more regular schedule. I'm at the school only like 1.5 days a week right now. So most of the class stuff I'm doing is digital, like this, over a camera, which is feels weird because you don't have the same kind of in-person connectivity with your students.
Absolutely.
But I gotta admit, it is also really convenient, you know, because there is no commute. Like,
yes, that's right. No travel.
I finish class and I get up and I walk away and I'm at home. Like,
right.
So I've got time to like cook a nice dinner or spend a little bit more downtime, or just, spend time with my wife and friends and things like that in ways that I didn't before very much. But that being said, most of the time on any particular comic project or writing project, there's always a development period. So you're coming up with the story, you're working with the editor. If they've approached me about a specific project, then the parameters are pretty clear. This is what we need. This is the format. This is the deadline, etc. But sometimes I'm trying to propose projects. So sometimes you're trying to build momentum for a thing that you want to do. And so you're putting together a proposal and you're trying to get someone to look at it and then get them to sign off on it. Yeah, that's a good idea. Oh yeah, we can put that on the schedule, or let's find a budget for it, or whatever. So it's sort of a mixture of those two things. Some of those projects are things that I've kind of generated from the ground up, and other things are things that I've been brought because they're like, oh, we think you'd be a good fit for fill in the blank. And that development period can be really short if the deadlines are tight. So for example, literally 2 days ago, an editor approached me about a project and it's pretty extensive.
Right.
And I was like, when do we need the proposal? And they were like, it would be great if we had it before the weekend. And I was like, oh my God. So I've got like 48 hours to kind of hammer out an idea. That is not ideal or normal.
Right.
But here we are. This is what it is. And so I kind of emailed back and I go, I need this research material right now so I can read, so I can let this percolate in my brain and try and figure this thing out.
Right.
I got the proposal in this morning.
Okay, that's good. I was about to say, I might take you wait for the proposal.
You're like, wait, Jim, don't you have a proposal to work on? Yes. One of the reasons why I can do this interview is because I got that handed in. So
that's good. That's good.
Yeah, it's good, right? But once that thing is done and I've got it approved and signed off on, the actual scripting process, I know some writers find it frustrating. I kind of love it. It's really because I know what the format is now and I know what the story is. Some people are, the terms we use for it are planners or pantsers. So people that fly by the seat of their pants, or people that make a plan.
Right.
Thankfully, I'm a planner.
Okay.
So I build a structure. I know what the beginning, middle, and end of the story is going to be. And you try and leave yourself open to the flexibility of new ideas coming into it, or brainstorms and things like that that will change it. But you still have an overriding structure, which is really valuable. And so once I get down to actually scripting, I'm usually doing between 5 to 10 script pages a day. So if things are roaring and I'm not interrupted, I could do a script in 2 days for a comic.
Right.
But usually I'm interrupted because it's not like you're only working on one project at a time. While you're sending one thing in for approvals, you're doing lettering proofs on a book that's getting finished. Or while you're proposing one idea, someone else is approaching you about another thing. Or while you're outlining one particular concept, the colored pages are coming in for something else and they need your feedback. Or, hey, we've decided when we're launching that project we told you we're going to go ahead with, we need to come up with the ad copy and make sure you sign off on it. Or, get on a phone call and go over stuff for the future, or any of those things. And so at any particular time I'm juggling between 4 and 6 different projects,
right?
And each of those have got their own mini schedules that are roaring along, and that can be kind of chaotic because I write a few pages, I stop for lunch, all of a sudden the emails have piled up while I was ignoring them for a few hours. I've got to answer these ones, they're super important. And then the minute you answer them, answers are coming back, and now you're jumping on a phone call and you're like, well, that just melted down my afternoon. Like
Right,
that's
yeah.
just done. And so sometimes I'm working in the evenings, and sometimes I'm waiting to hear back from people. You know, the ideal is like, if you imagine it like hot potato,
Yeah.
you know, you're throwing it back to them and then running away and hoping they don't throw it back to you. So
Right,
you get
exactly.
little bit of free time in there or whatever. So sometimes, you know, like people say, oh, have you watched, you know, did you finish watching What If? And I'm like, no, I haven't finished watching it yet. And they're like, dude, you work for Marvel. I'm like, yeah, and I got deadlines. That's why I haven't finished watching it yet. I'm sure it's wonderful. I'm very excited. That's why it took me 3 weeks to watch Black Widow. Not because I don't want to, not because I don't care, but I got to get the work done. You know what I mean? Or they're like, oh man, the new D&D book's awesome. Have you read it? I'm like, my reading list is this monstrous pile of reference material that I have to get through.
Right,
you know?
right, absolutely.
And stuff like that. It's not because I don't want to. It's not because I don't care. Man, I still love this stuff to bits, but you're constantly kind of prioritizing these other things to make sure stuff gets done. But yeah, you get these pure bursts where I'm able to sort of put together a script in 2 days, and you get that sucker handed in and you cross it off the to-do list and you're like, I'm a writer. And then all of a sudden all this stuff falls on top and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, or how are we going to get this done? And, you know, it's like every week is a bit of its own kind of adventure.
Right.
And I like the variety. I like that if something's not working right now creatively, I can kind of step away. There's always something else to do. I can work on some other aspect of it and then come back to it and kind of go, okay, let's refurbish this thing, or let's reorganize it, or try and figure out why it's not coming together the way I want it to, you know?
And one more thing before we leave, one thing that really got me, I believe I was reading an article about how you were saying that why you still teach, even though you don't really need to. So
no, I don't. It's weird. Like, I you know, I've taught for a lot of years, and there have been times when I looked at the workload that I've got writing and I was like, I could step away. Financially, I could step away, no problem. But emotionally, it's harder to. I really have a bond with the students. I really love it. Every year that I teach, I am instantly reminded of what it felt like to get my start. I remember the nervousness. I remember the fears I had of, oh, what am I going to do when this is all over? And the excitement that I had as a student. And that reminds me, and it recharges me all the time. It keeps me humble. It keeps me focused. It's like, remember why you got into this. Remember the kind of excited and energetic person you were at the start of this journey. Don't lose that, you know? So I say to people, as stressful as it can be sometimes, it also kind of keeps me young. Like, even though the hair's going gray up, it's like my heart is really, you know, like beating strong and youthful because of the students and because of their inspiration and their excitement and their engagement. And on top of that fact, it reminds me just of all those things that I wanted to be and who I wanted to be. And it's like, I want to be that person still. Like, I want to prove to them and show to them, hey, this is for real. This is, you can do this stuff. You can make these things happen. Don't, you know, I've had those fears. I have lost confidence in myself at times. I still do. You know, one of the things I say to my students, I think this is really valuable, actually. People talk about imposter syndrome, right? That feeling of, I'm not meant to be here, I'm not good enough, all those things, except everyone feels that. Every Hollywood actor, every hit musician, every artist goes through this. The difference for me now, I still get it. I work on projects, and in the middle of the project, I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to get through this? Or how's this going to work? Or I don't know if I can pull this off. Or I thought I knew what I was doing and maybe I don't. The difference is now I've got, so this is my shelf. This is 1, 2, 3, goes off the camera, 5 shelves of books I've written. But every single time I came through and I finished and it worked out. So instead of being like, I suck and I can't do it, and I throw in the towel, now I think to myself, oh, this is the part of the project where I think I suck. Man, I hate being here again. I wish I didn't have to do this part of the process, but here we are again, my old friend, doubt. I've beat you before. I've come out the other side and I have all this work to show for it. I will do it again. Like, I'm going to push through. And so, you know, sometimes you get up, or I go talk to my wife and she can just see the look on my face and she goes, you're not in a good spot right now. I'm like, nope, nope, it's not working at this moment, and go for a walk or read a book or think about other things, and then come back to it and tackle it again as fresh as possible,
Right,
and break through,
Mhm.
So it's, if you are someone who has doubts or fears, understand that we all do, that we
Mhm.
always do,
Mhm.
but the difference is that if you are able to make things and finish things, you will get better at it, and you will be able to do it more consistently. You'll be able to break through those doubts more frequently. And now I just get angry at it. Now I'm just
Right.
sitting there and like, really doubt again? Geez, man. Okay. All right. Let's kick it until it goes away. Let's keep punching away until we break through, whatever it's going to be. So, yeah.
Right. Right on, right on. That's good. That's fantastic. And again, Jim, like especially, I teach as well, or I used to anyway. But there's the thing you could tell, and the students can tell when a teacher's kind of just there for the paycheck.
Yeah.
And then you could tell when the teacher really, really does care. And
Yeah,
you can see
absolutely.
right away that, Jim, we can all tell that you really, really do care about
Thanks,
the people
man.
you teach. So thank you. And I only want people like that on this podcast. That's why Jim's here. People who
Thanks,
really
man.
do care about the next generation, and helping all of you who are watching today really try to go and achieve your dreams no matter what. So, where can we follow you online? People who want to follow you.
Really easy, actually. I've got one kind of hub site for everything. So it's just jimzub.com. So JIMZUB.com. And that's where you'll find links to my Twitter and my Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff, as well as interviews. There's extensive, list of books that I've worked on that you can link to and buy, but there's also a whole section of tutorials. So I talk about how to write a pitch, or how to break in with comics, or kind of things that I wish I had known when I was starting off in the comic book industry.
Mhm.
And all that stuff is free. But if you want to go even deeper and dive into the process and really, really get you up to your elbows in it, I've got a Patreon where I use it as essentially a script archive. So
Right.
I have over 250 scripts that I've written
Wow.
that have been published as comics. I can't believe I've written over 300 comics,
Wow.
but about 250 of them are there now, along with pitches and revisions. So you can actually see, this is the story I pitched to the publisher. This is what they wanted fixed. This is how I adjusted it. This is how I scripted it. Here's how we went through from, the original concept through to the published version. And so, as kind of a deep dive to really understand the process, that is, kind of what it's there for. So for the price of like a fancy coffee, you can dig through over 250 scripts, compare it to the published version, and learn, right from the ground up.
That sounds like an incredible resource. That's amazing that you're sharing that with everyone. That's
thanks,
pretty awesome. So we'll have that linked up for sure. We'll have his Patreon down in the notes below. So make sure you follow Jim and support him as well, and all of his work. Pick up all his books. So Jim, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. I'm very humbled that you wanted to be a part of the podcast.
It was my
So
absolute pleasure.
Thank you for being here today.
There it is. That is my interview with Mr. Jim Zub. Once again, thank you to Jim. So hopefully he's okay with me reposting this. But again, go check out Jim. Go follow him on all social media. All right, all social media. Check out my buddy Jim Zub. Check out everything that he's writing, especially Savage Sword of Conan. And go check him out at all conventions that he's attending all around the world. And make sure that you follow me. Hopefully this weekend, dear my friends. Hopefully, I said my dear friends. Hopefully this weekend, my dear friends, I will be live again, but it will probably be at an early time. So if I am streaming live, it'll probably be very, very early morning. Okay, so that's around 5 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, something like that. If I have a convention, I'll do it live, but hopefully I'll get to chat with every one of you this coming weekend. So thank you guys for watching. You guys are the best. My name is James. I am the box office artist. I'm here to say keep drawing. I'll see y'all next time. Take care. You are listening to the Box Office Artist Podcast.